October 23, 1944. The fields of eastern France were quiet that morning. Too quiet. Mist hung over the Meurthe River Valley, thick enough to hide the glint of steel. German tank crews inside their Panthers and Tigers smoked nervously, scanning the tree line. They believed the Americans were still regrouping after the previous night's bombardment. But what they didn't know was that a new predator had arrived, a tank destroyer built not for defense, but for the hunt. From 2 miles away, under the cover of fog and silence, the M36 Jackson waited. Its long 90-millimeter gun, the same weapon that could punch through 7 inches of armor, was pointed straight at the enemy. Lieutenant John Peters, commanding one of the first M36s to enter combat, later wrote in his logbook, "It felt like we were holding a thunderbolt in our hands. We just had to aim it right." To understand what was about to happen, you have to imagine the battlefield in those weeks. The German counterattacks across Lorraine were fierce. They were desperate to hold every bridge, every hill, every road that led toward the Saar industrial region. American Sherman tanks had fought bravely, but paid a heavy price. The standard 75-millimeter guns simply couldn't penetrate the thick frontal armor of a Panther unless they were almost suicidal close. Tank crews knew it. "We could hit them," one sergeant said, "but half the time it just made the Germans angry." So the Americans tried something radical. They took the chassis of a proven M10 tank destroyer, removed its outdated 3-inch gun, and mounted the new 90-millimeter M3 cannon, originally designed for anti-aircraft fire. The result was the M36 Jackson. Light, fast, and able to kill a Tiger from twice the distance the Tiger could kill it. By late October, the first units of the 703rd Tank Destroyer Battalion rolled into the French countryside, their open-topped turrets cold with dew, and their crews still learning what the new gun could do. Captain Frank Dyson described the feeling in his letter home. "We're driving something that finally bites back. The men can sense it. We move quieter, hold our breath longer. When that breach closes, every man knows what's coming next." That morning, the German tanks began to move across the low ridge near the village of Châtel-sur-Moselle. They were confident, perhaps too confident. Their radios crackled with orders to advance. Dust rose behind them as engines roared to life. Panthers and Panzer IVs rolled forward in neat formation, their commanders standing half out of the turrets, scanning through binoculars. They didn't know that American observers had already marked their position on the map grid. The Jackson crews adjusted elevation and range. 2 miles, a long shot for that era. At that distance, the shell would take almost 3 seconds to reach its target. The gunner, Corporal William Red Haskins, whispered, "God, let this one count." The commander's voice came calm. "On the lead Panther, fire." The first shell screamed across the valley and vanished into the mist. Then, an orange flash, followed by a low, rolling boom. The Panther's turret burst open like a matchbox. The gunner reloaded. Second shot, another strike. Within 30 seconds, 2 of Germany's most feared tanks were burning wrecks. The surviving crews panicked. Their heavy armor, built for slugging matches at short range, suddenly meant nothing. The Jacksons were too far away, too fast, and too well hidden. When the German tanks tried to pivot toward the threat, they discovered their fatal flaw. A Panther's wide tracks and manual turret transverse meant it could take almost a full minute to swing its gun 90 degrees. In that minute, the Americans fired again.
One German report from the 11th Panzer Division recorded the shock in precise mechanical language. Enemy fire of extraordinary range. Turrets cannot react in time. One vehicle destroyed before sighting origin of attack. But another soldier, years later, described it more simply. We were like elephants in a field, and the hunters were invisible. As the battle spread, American artillery joined in. Smoke shells burst overhead, cutting off German visibility entirely. The Jacksons used their speed, 35 miles per hour on open ground, to reposition between shots. Each time the Germans thought they'd located the attackers, the muzzle flash came from somewhere else. Within half an hour, the ridge was a graveyard of twisted metal. Lieutenant Peters recalled what it felt like to command through that chaos. The ground shook like a heartbeat. You could smell the paint burning off their tanks. When they started to retreat, we just kept hitting them, one after another. We didn't cheer, we just watched. But not everything went perfectly. A German 88mm anti-tank gun opened up from the flank, destroying one Jackson instantly. Another crew was killed when a shell exploded through the open turret. The men learned quickly that speed and surprise were their only armor. Captain Dyson later wrote, "You don't sit still in a Jackson. If you're not moving, you're dead." By evening, the battlefield fell silent again. American infantry moved forward to secure the burning ridge. They passed the wrecks of German tanks, their engines still ticking with heat. Nearby, a single M36 crew climbed down from their vehicle, blackened by soot but grinning faintly. They had destroyed 6 German tanks in one day. News of the Jackson's success spread fast. Frontline units requested them by name. Mechanics worked through the night to retrofit older vehicles. Within weeks, hundreds of M36s were rolling east toward the German border. They became the spearhead of the American push into the heart of the Reich. But the Jackson was more than a machine. It symbolized a turning point in how the Allies fought. No longer outgunned, they now dictated the terms of engagement. They could strike first and vanish before the enemy could respond. It was a psychological shift as much as a tactical one. One German officer captured near Metz said, "Your tanks do not fear ours anymore. That is when we knew we were finished." As winter approached, the Jacksons fought through the Ardennes, across the Rhine, and deep into Germany itself. Their open turrets left crews exposed to shrapnel and cold, but they kept fighting. "We didn't think about dying," said Corporal Haskins in an interview years later. "We just thought about staying one shot ahead." By war's end, over 2,300 M36 Jacksons had been built. They destroyed thousands of German armored vehicles, from the hulking Tigers of Normandy to the last desperate Panzers defending Berlin. But behind every statistic was a human story. A loader with trembling hands, a driver steering blind through smoke, a commander whispering calm orders while the earth shook beneath him. Standing on that ridge today, you can still see the faint tracks where tanks once moved, now overgrown with grass and silence. The air feels heavy, as if it remembers the sound. For those who fought there, it wasn't just another battle. It was proof that innovation and courage could turn the hunter into the hunted. In the end, the Germans built their tanks to dominate by power and armor. The Americans built theirs to adapt, to think, to move faster than fear itself. And that morning in France, when the M36 Jacksons struck from 2 miles away, the battlefield learned a timeless lesson. In war, the weapon that moves first and thinks faster always wins.